It is your buddy. Peace and harmony with you here today. Much love going out to all the beautiful empowered harmonizers. And we are zooming in and focusing in on a very important topic. And this is a result of a flood of emails and correspondences in stories and situations that have recently come in and have been relayed to me, especially as it relates to the boundary violation of a female psychopath, a female malignant narcissist, someone who has gone bonkers, haywire, off the deep end. They are making a slew of excuses, perhaps to try to reel you back into the game, into the batter's box, into the fighting ring, to take them back, or to at least keep you strung along in the relationship. So when we really look at this sort of personality type, once again, we're not diagnosing or treating someone on this channel. We are looking more at a proliferation of very textbook behaviors, thoughts, personality traits that typify someone who is psychopathic. Dr. Robert Hare, a Canadian psychologist who created the Hare checklist, has done in-depth study of patient populations who are psychopathic, and he developed his Hare checklist. And number one, that's typifying of this sort of personality type, and you can read his book, Snakes and Suits. I would definitely recommend that book and read any information you can get written by Dr. Robert Hare. He is predominant, in the field and a leader, so he's a real great resource to go to. But when we look at this and kind of look at the differences of the male and female, you see a higher preponderance of the male psychopath who have resorted to a life of violence, a life of criminality, a life of remorseless acts, which end them up in the prison system, being incarcerated. Now, and it's, at the root of it is a kind of a ruthless aggression. It's not like I had to do this to get diapers for my baby. It's just a matter that we're cold-blooded, and this is a life of entertainment for them, or it's just a life of getting significance and being in power, a position of power, and then they get a sort of reward from this ruthless act. There was something recently in the news. I don't like to talk about the situations or keep it to time and dated because I want you to be able to relate to this. But, someone who, there was a recent shooter at, the Waffle House. Whether this person is this type or not is yet to be known. But, people who go on sprees or who are remorseless and have more of an absorption with these horrific acts and breaking the rules. They don't feel that they need to abide by specific norms, boundaries, rules, and regulations that all of us need to abide by. So they're really a lack, of discipline, lack of responsibility, and creatures of indiscipline. And so they tend to then, get their hold on others through breaking people down and breaking down their natural boundary state, their natural standard state, i.e. what makes you you, the values that you hold on to. So when we look at the female, and really what I have seen through my extensive experience with this population and looking and receiving a lot of input from you all, is that it's going to play out a little bit differently. But, a couple things you need to understand about this type of personality, and you do have to make the ultimate decision for yourself, is to understand that these individuals do not have a sort of internal guidepost of morality. So their amygdala is somewhat disconnected from the prefrontal lobe. So if we were to look at brain scans, there's this high preponderance of a lack of fear and not being able to sense fear in those people or victims with whom they are committing these acts. So in other words, if you were to see something horrific, you would see the expression on their face and they would be like, whoa, stop. And then they would be able to register that. This feeling of fear, this feeling of, this is gone too far, when it's really gone too far. And these individuals do not have a sense of sort of emotion, so like love, connection, humanity, having a value system, a mission system. So in other words, these sort of driving factors that are really at the core of a lot of, or at least most people, they have family values, a value for freedom, liberty, religious, freedom of expression, things of this nature. So there's something sort of driving someone there. When you're looking at someone who's really kind of what they call the intra-species predator. So in other words, they are going to prey upon individuals of their own kind, i.e. the population at large. So when you think of a predator, think of like a lion, think of an eagle, or a bird of prey. In other words, they're looking to take, the life of another for their sustenance. And so this is, an intra-species predator. So you really need to really understand the seriousness and really what I call, the lethal aspects of this. In other words, they're going to look to get whatever they can in terms of life force, life energy. Your boundaries and your standards are going to be what they're going to go for to get at this. And so the female, of course, because also if we look at this population, it is to understand that these individuals generally have a higher sensitivity to the dopamine response than most other people. So in other words, when they want something, they really want something. So it's kind of like obsession on steroids. And some people can be flattered by this. If you are a man and then you have this woman who is pining after you, chasing after you, traveling states, traveling time zones, knocking, beating down your door, beating down your window, getting your phone, getting your text, getting your office phone. So in other words, some men tend to take this as a little bit that they are desirable. And so if you have this as a weak spot and then you are falling for this, in other words, this individual has you essentially in their grip. So if you are then, engaged in this flattery of behavior, then they're going to be hitting on your weak spot cylinder, and they're going to have you open to being broken down. They're going to have you open to being violated. And you're not going to be able to understand it as such. You're going to perhaps interpret it as something other than what is really going on. And this is where it becomes very serious and people then begin to get taken advantage of. And so knowing this to be the case, the woman, can use this ploy, this tactic, this unrequited love, only you can satisfy me, all these little snippets, these pretty little lies, if you will, sweet little lies, sugar-coated, whatever it is that they can melt you down, making you simplified, i.e. if I do this, then perhaps they will take me back, pulling at the heartstrings, pulling at your humanity. I have no place to live. I have no job. My family this, my medications that. Whatever it is that they are pushing the buck on, pushing the envelope, if you then are taking it as that and then interpreting as, well, here I can be a savior, you are perhaps getting inundated with the manipulation tactics of these individuals. Because when they are on full force, these individuals will tend to play those weakness, those vulnerabilities once they know what they are. In other words, they're pushing the buttons, dun, 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 until finally you release. You say, I give in. They're basically, holding on to you emotionally and getting, squeezing you to the point where you want to give up, starving you for breath, just really squeezing you down. They've got you in their stranglehold. And so, and then to understand that oftentimes, one very typical response that I hear, well, the sex was out of the park. It was out of this world. It was fantastic. It was intoxicating. It's never been so good. OMG. So there's a lot of this. as what is, running, or they're really kind of an anchor in the relationship. But unfortunately, this hyper arousal, this high risk behavior, this promiscuity is really essentially a way for them to continue to get whatever it is that they want, but it's not going to end well. In other words, like a psychopath will tell you, and we've had many comments here, etc., from these individuals, and they're going to tell you, I am going to hurt you. It might not look that way, but in the end, that's where it's going. I mean, they offer that up. They're basically telling you this is how they play, and they know how it's going to end. It's a very, very pre-calculated, predetermined. They know that they're not in it for the long run with these people. They know that they don't have that. They don't have that connection, that loyalty, that bond. Hey, if something's going on with you, I'll be there. It's empty. It is not there, but they can put on a great guise or facade that, you are the one for me. Everyone else can fall away. It's you and me against the world. These are the sort of statements you'll hear. Notes on your doorstep with their perfume sprayed. Things like tears, things like excuses. I won't go to work until, we work this out. You're more important to me than anything else in the world. I apologize for my erratic behaviors. This was my medication. It was not me. If you look at these statements and really understand, if someone is going to give you an excuse that it's a side effect of their medication, and this was causing life difficulty, this person should be, relaying this to their physician, the prescribing doctor, and, this would be a reason for them to be taken off the medication. So if they make some sort of excuses, this was my medication, I had this and this time of the month, this and this happened, it was just a trigger for me. So if you really listen to what they're saying, they are giving you an excuse. If this works on you, you may need to take a step back and say, okay, I need to get some distance and some breathing room from the situation and not be swept off of my manly feet by this female who is violating my boundaries, giving me what I want to hear, showing me what I think I want to see, and then pulling me back. And so it's, because, and then the other thing is that, unfortunately, if you have a track history with this person where they have done unassailable things to you in violation of your boundaries, breaking you down, and, gone against you emotionally or cheated on you. I mean, these are the facts. You need to keep the facts in front of you and keep that as what the focus on, because the problem why people get pulled back on is they're looking for all the reasons to stay and continue the denial. In other words, they're not looking at the truth. They're not looking at the objective. They are looking at all these other distractions, the sex, the sweet nothings, it's easier for me to be broken down versus moving forward. If I could wind back time, this would take me back to my 16-year-old days. If I could turn back time like that song, I have a lot of people who say that they wish they could kind of go back into their cocoon. Unfortunately, we can't turn back time. That and to desire that is to really desire a life of heartbreak, and to live in denial and not in face with reality, your reality. So the further you push away that truth, the further it's going to come slamming back in your face once upon a day. And so it's easier to, once you take a step back and see how this has been used against you, to get you back down, to break you down, keeping you exhausted, a number of texts, a number of pictures, keeping it so that you can't think straight, but they're trying to get you to feel back and get re-addicted. It's kind of like if you're an alcoholic, like I had a viewer say, having a drink of alcohol, one drink is too much and 1,000 is never enough. So it's like this insatiable need and this addiction which pulls them in. In other words, the drink is drinking them versus them drinking the drink. Napoleon Hill. So it's kind of like this person is playing you and you're going to get played in this manner. They know that they are, as a psychopath has stated, they will respectfully disrespect you. I'm going to say it again. It's a tongue twister, but once you have gotten it, you will get it. They will respectfully disrespect you. So bottom line, what are they doing? Disrespecting you. And now, knowing this to be the case, you need to see it for what it is and then ask yourself, why would I want to subject myself to this disrespect? What is telling me that this is how my relationships should be? And for me to get wiped out emotionally, wiped out financially, wiped out from my family, so that they are no longer there for me because they've seen I've now, had my face buried, by this person through blackmailing, through things that they say, through lies that they tell. Nothing will hold them back. And so why are you trying to put yourself back into that regressed, disrespected position where you're going to be abandoned and ending up with nothing? What part of you is afraid of owning the truth and your success and your solace and being able to cut it off? Why is it difficult to make a decision? You have to be able to get some distance and then neutralize this trigger. Neutralize meaning understand it with an indifferent, sort of dispassionate, neutral. In other words, I'm not feeling good about it. I'm not feeling bad about it. It just is. And then being able to understand then that you can see it for what it is, so you can actually act in your best interest versus your disinterest, which is then taken care of and being a parasitic host to this individual, the intraspecies predator. So, understanding this is very difficult. It is not easy to pull yourself away. It is to understand that these sort of hyper-arousal, these high-risk behaviors are typical of this type of individual. Whether we put a label on them or not, it is to say that these are the hallmarks. This is what we see, and it's not going to end well. It's it's the ability to see clearly how one has been manipulated, and they are vying for your manly sense to be a provider, to be the strong one, to quote unquote not care. That does not bother me. In other words, I am man enough to handle this. I'm strong enough to handle this. This should not bother me. This is the manly thing to do. This is the right thing to do. I'm a provider. So what you're doing is you're opening up the floodgates for you to be vulnerable and then taken advantage of on these qualities. So especially in today's day and age, it's kind of like, women are strong. They need to come into their own power and provide and do for themselves. For you to fall prey and feel, weakened in the knees and meek by this is not, really what's going to be in your best foundation of yourself when you see this sort of, coming at you and then to give in. In other words, it's to feel, that satisfying of an addiction now, which is setting up more of an addiction from hitherto you have not been addicted to, whether you've had drug or alcohol addictions or others. This is creating a new, serum, if you will, within that's tied to this person. But understand that if you have history to the contrary, with which they have not been loyal, truthful, etc., you need to look at that. That is where your truth, Dr. Robert Hare. To understand what these people do, it's to not look at the charm, not look at the flashy cleavage. It's to not look at the pouty lips. It's to not look at the sweet nothings that you want to hear. It's to see reality for what it is. And no matter how gut-wrenching, no matter how hard it is to say that is the case and I deserve better. If you have a problem feeling that you don't deserve better and that eventually you want to go through this up and down and then eventually end up discarded at a darker place, then that is a decision up to you. When we talk about, hurting people and going for ruin, we're talking about, the gravest of all hurts. We're talking about financial ruin, public ruin. We're talking about losing your family, losing a sense of identity, losing a sense of where your values are, living in sort of a psychological feeling of terror where you don't know what's what and then you can't focus anymore because this addiction has its grips on you. It is to understand that there's, not good, strong feelings if you go down that path. And so it's to put some brakes on where this person does not have brakes. And, it is to say, it's to put some boundaries for yourself, no matter what is required to protect yourself. Moving, getting a restraining disorder, getting a lawyer, getting a mediator, so you have the law to protect you on your side. This is not something to be ashamed of. This is not an admittance of weakness, of guilt. It's just saying, hey, I've got, a wackadoodle over here who is, doing X, Y, and Z, and I need you to do A, B, and C, and not feeling that you're any less a man, any less, strong, any less able to handle it on your own. There's no pride and dignity in getting assailed and victimized. There's no pride in trying to handle it yourself when there's things, in place that can protect you. So it's to protect your clarity, your focus, your sense of, your best judgment. It's to get out of that fight or flight, the emotional response where you are, losing control of your decision-making faculties to this person. And so if you're afraid to get distance, afraid to put an end to it, you have to understand, what is this fear? Am I afraid of being alone? Am I afraid of feeling admittance of a failure? Am I, is this a stigma to me? Does this make me embarrassed that this person has done this? Why am I assigning this meaning to myself, which is negative and disempowering in nature, when you can identify it and should as an act of self-protection, self-preservation, and the right thing to do? It is the right thing to do to become self-reliant, be able to complete your focus, your work, without, having fear or trepidation that things are going to go south on you, and to be able to do this and that you can maintain that moving forward. And it is to understand that any sort of, feeling of an error of judgment, you can indeed admit this to yourself. I had a temporary lapse of judgment. I had brought this person back into my life. I thought this was the right thing to do. However, there are some issues there, which I need and respect this person to now go with and deal on their own. In other words, it's the most respectful thing to allow this person to go and work through all their issues on their own. And I'm not going to be a target or a pawn in that anymore, because that is not the right thing to do for me. It's not the right thing to need to do for that person. And I don't need to explain this to them. I just need to have that dialogue with myself. So if in the privacy of this video, you can have that understanding, a heart-to-heart with yourself, as an individual so aptly stated, self-partner. That's a great way to put the term. You need to partner with yourself. You need to be your own best partner in this. And your own best partner will take you then to the professionals, to the people who can see through the fog for you, who can help to say, nope, you're getting taken advantage of. Let's stop this. You can't see this, but we can see it for you. So it's letting others' eyes be the proper, trustworthy eyes for you. Not the kind of eyes that are to help this other individual. In other words, make you react, oh, you didn't respond appropriately, why aren't you getting sucked in? Why aren't you making this person's problem your problem? That is a big one. In other words, I've helped you with this problem before. I've helped you financially. I've helped you emotionally. I've been there through health issues, and so they're expecting you to follow the pattern. They're, expecting you to take on their problems as your own. Do you see the boundary violation? Do you see where you are not allowing this person responsibility and accountability? Hey, that's your area. That's your business. That is your responsibility. It's not my responsibility. Do you see how these individuals give up responsibility if they can for their emotional challenges and then take the life force out of others in order to pacify and get, parasitically what they need? And then when you see the cold-hearted decisions, that they make, the unfeeling, lack of empathy. In other words, there's no, give and take. There's no law of reciprocity with their values. In other words, would they do unto others as they have done unto you? In other words, are they giving you in return what you have given to them? Is there a back and forth? Is there an exchange? And would you put all your burdens onto this person and not have responsibility for yourself? So that's why if we see someone who is largely irresponsible for their emotions, for their finances, for their, emotions particularly, this can, run the gamut, from crazy making to brainwashing to gaslighting in the most serious of nature. So if you are really in too deep, it's time to say, okay, I get it, peace and harmony. I was in too deep. I've got a little bit of a rough road ahead of me. I've got to get a foothold. I've got a slippery slope. It's raining down mud right now, and it's tough for me to go up. I get that. But little by little, if you really look, there's a little baby step you can make where you can get a stick, carve out a little foothold, stand there for a moment, remain neutral. Don't, stand in the wake of more mudslide, more emotional rampage that can come from these individuals. Remember, it's more of an aggression, and they do this to kind of get back their sense of power. And it is to understand that oftentimes too, like Thomas Sheridan has stated, these individuals can have a high preponderance of testosterone. So it's like they're really going for what they want, and then with a lack of empathy, with a lack of conscience, they're just kind of going for what they want without awareness of the repercussions or consequences. And if you enable them so that they don't have to have the consequences from you, you continue to allow them to take advantage, violate your boundaries, get you hyper aroused, give you, and this is through, violating your ears, violating your eyes, violating your skin, violating your workplace, your home. If this has been, waffled over, it's time for you to say, wow, no more waffling. I need to kind of recommit to the blueprint. I need to go back to the blueprint. This has happened here at this junction in my life. We're now going to kind of etch out. We're going to take a pen to paper and we're going to go over here. This is the case. This is what we're observing. So if you can just kind of observe it from a dispassionate, indifferent place and say, this happens to good people. And it doesn't mean that you're a bad person or you have to feel any less of a man or a failure. This hasn't made you, but it helps you to see more your own values, that what you want to give, but this person unfortunately does not have the ability or the personality to be there for others. So that's how people are. And this person happens to be one of those people. Whether you want to put a label on them or not is up to you, but it's just, keeping very objective. So not taking it personal, getting very neutral, not this, not that, just getting to a state of indifference, a state of peace. That is going to be your best foundation. And then you have this unconditional positive self-regard. In other words, even though this has happened, this is not going to scar me. This is not going to scar us. This is not going to scar my family. And I know we're getting a little long here, but it is to say that oftentimes people, what I hear is they oftentimes are concerned of being quote unquote scarred by this. In other words, this has made an indelible mark. This has changed my perspective. I feel that this has really altered my personality. And once again, it is using the cognitive reframing tool to state that this is not necessarily a scar. This is a lesson learned. So what you are feeling is a state of increased awareness and astuteness and intelligence. So this is an increased higher consciousness. It is not necessarily a scar. In other words, it's not going to make you disformed, disfigured, that there's something inherently wrong with you. It is a strength. It's almost like a lightning rod of truth that you have beaming out from the top of your head down to the floor, to the center of the earth. That is the new strength. That is the strong, indelible energy that you have running through you. It is that crystal clear lightning, white lightning, truth and awareness and focus that you now have. If you want to call it a scar, I would, or being damaged or destroyed, not being able to love again, it is to understand that you have now just come upon your independence. You've now just laid foot and laid hands on your self-reliance. You've just laid hands on the barley stone, or whatever you call it, the true stone that you kiss it, and this is your truth. You've just now laid your body on the bedrock of truth. You've graduated to that. It is now inside you, and it is there to give you life. So that is now life force running through you. It is to become keenly aware, razor sharp. It is what people call, that is brilliant. That is, enlightenment. So this is a state that actually people strive for, is this awareness. So you have now laid your feet and laid hands on this truth. And so that is actually a very safe, very incredibly powerful and profound place to be. It is to say, I have made it to the lighthouse. I am now, out of the storm. My ship might be wrecked. In other words, that ship might be broken out into a million pieces. It's spread out over the ocean. My oars are sailing off into, the horizon miles away. And I am now at safety. So it's like that relationship was like a temporary boat that got you to safety. And you can't go and rebuild it. You can't, the wood is floated away, even if you wanted to, but you are at the lighthouse. So it is to say, I am here now. I made it. So now that you know that to be the case, and you hear the echoes, from the wind, the wind cries Mary, or whatever it is, the Jimi Hendrix, you're hearing back, from that maiden voyage. You're hearing that back. It's almost, I call it like, just have it a sense of nostalgia for you. Have it a sense that, that was a specific chapter in my life, which was whoa and whoa and whoa, and we're here now, and now we need to get acceptance of the stability and the safety, and this is your best interest, and is to say, this is actually the positive, and now I'm no longer made vulnerable by this, but it is to have now discerning of really kind of where your boundaries